Wow. They broke the tree to make that formation there.
With this from here. See how they leaned it up against that one?
Yeah.
Good at it. That's a real nice head. Almost as good as that one I showed you a picture of. That's a nice one right there. Leaned it against that tree, made an X. That's a young dude. Oh man, I'd love to see these guys because they're the friendly ones. They're the ones I had at the river.
They're the ones at what?
They're the ones I had at the river.
Oh, okay.
They're all in here.
This is definitely a place we need to come back and spend a little time in at nighttime.
That's a really nice edge.
What's that down there? Is that a creek?
Looks like a bottom
Or-
out down in there. Like
Or is that a big
creek.
fallen tree? I don't know.
What's
Okay.
a deep hollow down in there? Look at that.
Yeah.
Man, that's an awesome edge.
All right, here we go, everybody. Down here at LBO with my brothers, Martin Groves and Darrell Denton. Martin's done went to bed. Got my brother out here by the campfire. We're sitting out here talking. We had a lot of Bigfoot activity this weekend. Surprised me. I've been coming down here for a long time and never had anything happen, but now I can't say that anymore because, well, you'll see in the other videos that I've put up. So I want to talk to my brother Darrell. Darrell wants to share with y'all some of his many encounters with Bigfoot in the state of Tennessee. Listen, thank you, brother Darrell, for being here. We really appreciate it. Why don't you just start telling us about first time you saw Bigfoot in Tennessee?
Excuse
I
me.
think it was on your
First
grandpappy's farm, wasn't it?
First time I ever seen Bigfoot was in November the 6th of 1992 on my granddad's farm. And I hunted there all my life, but never that deep in the woods. And me and my friends were up there that weekend, and we went up there every year for 4 or 5 previous years. And opening a muzzleloader deer season, which is black powder in Tennessee. It opens a week, usually a week or 2 weeks before regular gun season. We were up there. I pulled my camper up there next to my grandfather's barn, and we hooked it all up and set everything up. My friends followed me along in their truck with a trailer, and we all had ATVs back then, or whatever you want to call them, four-wheelers.
Four-wheelers, yeah.
And we went up there, and like we had every year, and got all set up and everything, and grilled out that first night and had a big time. And I went up and visited my granddad, and this was the day before it opened on a Sunday. And I said, Granddad, I don't want a trophy deer this year. I'm not looking for just the venison or the meat. I want a big rack deer, which is a big buck deer with big rack. And my granddad said, he was on his back porch and he pointed out over and he said, you see that third hollow over there, that hilltop? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, go to that spot and go down the side of that hill and you'll see a creek. It's part of an old grist mill. When I was a boy, it was there, but it's been gone for years. And you'll see what's left of the old home place where I was born. And my granddad was born in 1900. I think it was 1900 or 1902. I can't remember which one at the moment. But he said the old house is falling in. Now you'll see the resemblance of the log and I think the chimney's still standing and part of the tin roof's still there. He hadn't been there in quite a few years, and we'd been there before by road. It's an old dirt road that goes back in there. But anyway, I headed out that way behind his house, went through a gate behind his house, and then I went into a big sage field. It's about 200 yards wide, and sage grass is 2 or 3 foot tall. It's kind of a brown looking grass. It's in the fall where the green grass has changed to a fence line, which, like I said, was about 200 yards from the gate. He had cattle in there, and they grazed in there in the pasture and around that sage, and we went to a fence, on the barbed wire fence on the tree line, and they held his cows in there, and they covered around that field, and I had to climb across that fence and go up a hill, and went over the first hill, the second one, and finally over the third one. These hillsides were steep too. They were probably 45 degrees, especially the first one and the last one. Good 45-minute to an hour walk over there. So I went on over the top and to the next one, and third one, and got down to the bottom of that last hollow, and I seen a creek, which I knew I was in the right area because I looked to the left and I seen some big old rocks that were part of the grist mill still in the stream. And this stream was about 10 or 12 foot wide, but it got a lot wider on the other end and kind of narrowed down in a few areas. Across the bank was a clearing in the woods, and I could see part of my granddad's old house to the far left. And I knew I was in the right spot, so I had my climbing stand on my back, which is a stand you can carry on your back like a backpack, and you can go in and take that stand and you put it around the tree, and then you put your feet in it and you sit down in it and you climb up a tree. And I did that. I found a tree on the side of that hill there facing that creek. Like I said, there was a small clearing across from it in the wooded area, and I climbed up it, and I had a little saw in my little fanny pack I had around me at that time, and I trimmed off a few limbs up there and got it set where I wanted for the next day, and came on back down, and then I crossed the creek. Went across the creek and was looking for deer signs, and I found a couple of scrapes, or what they call rubs, where a buck deer will rub its antlers on tree limbs or a bigger tree. Looked like a real good spot. A lot of acorns that year.
Like this year, huh? Never
Yeah,
seen
like
so
this
many
year.
acorns
A lot of
falling
acorns.
and walnuts.
And I found a tree limb. There was a game trail on top of that. There was actually a game trail on both sides of the creek bank, but the one on the other side was a lot more prominent. And I walked down that game trail right straight ahead of me. Now I had my tree standing like this hillside's like a 45-degree angle coming down, and the tree's straight up. So I was kind of overlooking that field area, overlooking the creek a little bit down on it. So it was going to be a real good spot that I'd picked out, and I had what was called a drag rag on my foot as I went in, and that's a elastic band you put around your boot, and it's got a little cloth that's probably 6 to 8 inches wide, and you put deer scent on it, and it kind of covers the human scent on the way in. It also leaves an aroma for a male deer, the buck, to follow that scent to the area that you drug it in on if they cross paths. And I found a tree right over in front of that, and I jumped up and grabbed the limb. It was probably 8 foot off the ground, and I put that drag rag on the end of the branch and let it go up, and it kind of left a scent through that hollow there, kind of flowed with the wind blowing, covered up the human smell, but also attracted the buck deer. So I headed on back, crossed the creek, went up the side of the hollow there, and crossed over all the way to the third hill, and went through my grandfather's gate and back down to the barn where my friends were, and they were all having a good time and grilling out, and we were excited for the first day of muzzleloader season, and we all had stands in different areas, and we had some stands that were built, and then we had some that we carried, and some of those were hunting in the same areas they had before. And went up to my granddad's house and told him, hey, wake me up in the morning because I'm going to have that long walk. I want to get there way before daylight. And he said, I'll do that. So my granddad never called me by my name. He always called me boy. And me and my granddad were real close. So we went on to bed that night. About 4:30, 5 o'clock the next morning, my granddad banged on the side of the camper and said, get up, boy, time to get up. So I got up, got my clothes, gear on, and headed that way. Went through behind my granddad's house through the gate and across the sage grass field till I got to the fence line, which was a barbed wire fence, probably about 7 foot tall. Climbed over that fence and I started going up the first hill. It was real steep. A lot of leaves. And I got a little ways up and I heard something to the left of me. And it kind of sounded like a person walking. Kind of got my attention. I shined my flashlight over in that area, but I didn't see anything. And I thought, you know, surely there ain't a person hunting in here because my granddad wouldn't allow that. Not with us hunting in there. Kind of stayed on my mind. I went on up over the next hill. Didn't see what it was, but I heard it. It sounded like a person walking. And I got over the second hill and on down to over the third hill, about halfway down, and I heard it on over to the left of me up on top of the third hill, which was going down to where my stand was. And I heard it walking, and it stopped when I'd stop, and then it walked, and I'd stop, and I shined the flashlight, couldn't see nothing. I got a little nervous about it, thinking, well, maybe it's a cow or a horse in here, but it didn't sound like that. It sounded like somebody walking. So I didn't hear it anymore. It kind of went down the hill to my left. And I went on and kind of hurriedly got in my tree. I went down to the bottom of the third hill, walked around the creek side, and I found my stand. Wasn't familiar with that area. I had my flashlight on and kind of quickly got in my stand and got up the tree. A little nervous, thinking what was that in the woods walking over there, thinking it might be another hunter. And I got up in my stand and leaned back on it, which makes the blade go into the tree real deep where it won't slide. And I put a safety strap that I always carried around me and tied it to a limb behind me. Then I'd carried my lunch with me. I hung it on a little limb above me that I'd cut off the day before, along with a fanny pack that I had around me that I carried my powder horn and my Hornady bullets and my firing caps that went on my 50 caliber muzzleloader, which you have to use a ramrod to pack it, and just like the old settlers did in the old day, it was a black powder rifle. And you only had one shot with it. And I reached up and took my binoculars off of me and hung it to the left on the limb up there. And then I leaned back in the stand to make the blade dig into the tree where it wouldn't slip. And felt pretty comfortable where I was at. And I had a little bar in front of me that pulled up. And that little bar pulled up and you tightened it up with a wing nut. And it was right below your neck, right across the top of your chest. And a little camo type cover came out of it and covered up all the way to your feet. And that way it looked like it was a part of the brush or part of the tree, kind of concealed you pretty good. And I always wore blackout under my eyes to keep the glimmer of the sunlight hitting my face and something seeing me, a deer coming out. And I sat there, it was dark. I don't know what time of the morning that was, probably 6:30 or so. I sat there for a good while and waited for the sun to come up. Didn't hear any sounds of that walking anymore. And still on my mind though, trying to think what would, right around daylight, I looked over toward the creek to that clearing over there, and it was a real foggy morning, and I could see the fog on top of the water of the creek. Couldn't really see the other side of other side to the clearing over there, or the little field in the woods. Yeah, as I watched the fog that morning break away from the creek, I could start to see the clearing across the creek. And I thought, you know, this is going to be a great morning. It was mostly sunny, And I was hearing the regular animals in the woods, which would be the squirrels and everything else running around, birds. And I looked over to the left of me, and there was a large cane thicket, which I'd seen the day before, but I didn't realize it was so long. It went all the way up this left side of this bank of the creek. And cane is kind of like a regular cane-looking material, grows real high, real tall and thick on the riverbank. And this cane thicket was really big, and it went all the way down the side, as far as I could see, down the left side of that creek bank. And there was a little ravine in it that kind of come out, and I could see that down there as the cane broke and went on up down. I don't know how far it went up the creek. It was a long way. And this cane was about 12 to 15 foot tall and real thick. A person couldn't walk through it. It was just too thick and too strong. And I was just looking around, and all of a sudden I seen a deer come out of that. Somewhere over around that cane, I seen a female deer, a doe, come out and walk down through the creek and went up to the side of the creek to the top of the other side of the creek bank, and there was a game trail on top of that, and it kind of turned right, and it was walking back in front of me. I was up overlooking that area. I was about 25 foot up, and I'm on a 45 roughly degree angle on this hillside, and the trees straight up, so it was kind of giving me a real good view over the creek into that field area, that clearing area, actually, in the woods. And then two more deer fought along with that one, and they were probably that year's, probably yearlings from that deer, the mother doe, and they weren't nearly as big as her, but they walked over around down that game trail, and they started eating acorns and kicking the leaves up like deer do, and just kind of milling around like deer do, looking for food. And I watched them for a good while. They walked around in that area in the clearing, and real calm. They never noticed me, and I didn't move. I watched them walk to the left, and I probably watched them a good 20 or 30 minutes, and then the big deer, the biggest one, which was, I figured, the mother, it was a doe, which is a deer that's a female that's usually has no horns, like a buck deer does. She was looking over toward that cane thicket to my left, and I looked back, and there was another, the little deer that was, the two other deer that was with her, one of them was to her right, and one of them was to the left, kind of behind her. All three of them were staring right in that cane thicket area up the creek bank a ways from me. And I noticed they were just froze looking in that area. Well, my first thought, well, here comes a big buck out of here, and a big buck is a male deer with, I was looking for a trophy deer, one with a big rack, a large antlers, and just kept staring at it. And then all of a sudden, the larger deer, her ears was poking just straight up like a deer does when they've spotted something that they're paying attention to. And the other two deer were doing the same thing, or just frozen looking at that area to the left. Then all of a sudden, the front deer, the large one, she raised her right front paw, and she raised it up, and she kind of pawed like 2 or 3 times down, like she was trying to get something to move. And she did that, and then she raised her nose up like she was trying to smell something like deer do. Then all of a sudden she let a real loud blowing sound, like almost sounds like somebody sneezing, except a lot louder, not larger. And I thought, wow, there must be a big buck coming out of that cane thicket over there somewhere. And she just stood there for a second, and then all of a sudden she turned to her right, and she took off running right straight across in front of me as I'm looking down on them on that game trail as fast as she could run. And the other two following her, and they were running like somebody had shot at them. Normally a deer doesn't do that unless something's really spooked them or somebody has fired at them. And they ran all the way down that path till I lost sight of them as they went into the hardwoods. Well, I'm sitting there thinking, here comes a big old buck deer out of here. and I was looking to my left, and I had my gun laid on that bar that was in front of me with that camo cover that fell down to my feet, and I remember reaching down and pulling the trigger back on it. It's a single shot 50 caliber black powder rifle, and you've only got one shot. You can reload, but it takes quite a bit of time to reload. So I was thinking I'm ready, and kept looking to the left, and then I started noticing the cane in the very back part of it was moving, and this was 10 or 12 foot tall cane. I mean 12 or 15 foot tall cane. It's real tall, and it was moving from the back to the front. There was a lot of the cane moving in the middle until it got to the edge and something was about to step out, and I'm thinking, well, here comes this buck. And I looked in that area and looked, and then all of a sudden this thing stepped out, and I was like, what in the world is that? I just kept looking at it. Am I really seeing this? And it looked like a huge black monster. And stepped out and looked over across to that clearing, and it took one step and leaped, jumped the entire creek, which was 10 or 12 foot wide, and landed on that game trail over there. By this time, I'm in a panic thinking, what in the world is this? I've never seen anything like this. I was pretty frightened at that time.
Right, you said it looked like a monster, brother.
Yeah.
So, can you elaborate a little bit on the details?
Yeah, when it walked down the trail there, it went to the right and walked down in front of me, and it stopped, and it looked right at me. It knew exactly where I was at, and I was in a state of just shock, really. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I don't scare very easy and never have, and I've never seen anything like that. I was thinking, what in the world is this thing? And it was staring right at me, knew exactly where I was at.
What did it look like?
It was just tall and black, and it had its right side of his mouth was kind of twisted up. It's hard to explain. And
Like in a grimace?
not really. It just looked like maybe mad looking. It was definitely mean looking, like it was mad at me being there. And then it gritted its teeth and showed me its teeth. And when it showed me its teeth, I had
Excuse me.
a shock of fear go through me, like, this thing here is going to kill me. And it was just looking at me, and
How tall do you think it was?
it was about 8 foot tall, and I judged that by, as I'll get into the story a minute, to the limb I'd put that rag in. And it's looking right at me with its teeth, just showing me its teeth, and then it lets out a growl. And it's
Now, what did its teeth look like? Were they human, or were
they were just square, regular looking teeth, like a human. Yeah, they weren't fangs or any sharp pointed teeth or anything.
Right. What color was its eyes?
Its eyes were black, and it had some white on the outside of them, but I could see more yellow looking white than white, but it was just black eyes. And after it let that growl out, I was really kind of fearful. I thought, this thing's going to come across this creek and just jerk me out of this tree. And I was basically just in shock. I remember having my hand on the trigger, and I thought, well, if I shoot this thing with all I've got is a 150 caliber bullet, and even if I hit it, I don't think it's going to kill it, because it was just big, ugly, and mean looking. I've never seen anything that mean looking. And I was in a panic. I could barely breathe. I remember trying to just staring at it, being shaken, and just in a state of shock, really, that this thing was even there. Then it walks over to the right in front of me. And it reaches up that tree limb that I'd hung that drag rag in the day before, and it pulled it down, smelt of it, and then just ripped the whole tree limb out of the tree. And this wasn't a huge branch, but it was probably 10 or 12 feet from the base of the tree, probably 2 or 3, 4 inches before it went into the hardwood of the tree. But it still took a lot of force to tear it off like that. I figured that, and when he threw it on the ground, it walked right back to where it was, and it's staring at me again like it just wants to kill me. And I'm trying to make my mind up. Do I run? Do I shoot this thing? What do I do? Couldn't make my mind up what I wanted to do. And I knew I couldn't get down the tree stand fast enough to get away from it. And I'm still basically just scared to death, and I didn't know what this thing's intentions were. I'd never seen anything like that. And as it's staring at me, it lets out. I do one of these old Iron Man watches on. I used to wear these old Iron Man watches back in that day, and the reason why I wore them because they had what was called an Indiglow. You could push a little button, and they would light up in the dark.
Yeah, I remember those.
And it had a little stopwatch on it. It had 3 little buttons on the side. You could push that stopwatch, and I had pushed that when it came out. And then when I got back, I realized it was 8:23 in the morning when it came out, and when I was about ready to leave, I'd pushed it again, and I did that because I kept up when the deer came out, and that way I'd know the next time I went back, thinking this was a deer in the beginning. It was 8:23 in the morning. It looks at me. By this time, I was trying to make a decision whether to fire or to try to get out of there and run, and I didn't know how I was going to get down the tree because it takes a good 10 or 15 minutes to get down that tree with a climbing stand. And time I got all my gear and everything, it may be longer than that. But anyway, it looks at me, and all of a sudden it's staring at me like it's wanting to kill me, and it lets out a scream or a yell like I've never heard. Never heard that yell again on any of the Sierra sounds or anything else I've heard. I've never heard a yell like that. And it echoed all down that hall.
Oh my goodness gracious.
It echoed all down that
Sorry about
hall.
that, folks. It's just
So,
fire.
that's about the way I felt when that thing popped. So,
Right. So you're looking at this thing, and it lets out this scream, and it's
it's
the
incredible.
first time you ever realized that monsters were really
Sure,
real.
I didn't know what this thing was, but it was definitely big and mean looking. And where I come up with the 8 foot, I'm 6'5", and when I raise my arm all the way up, it's about 8 foot if I stretch it to the length, and that's about where that rag was hanging from that tree. So it was right around 8 foot, maybe a little more, a little less. And when it screamed like that, I thought, well, this is it. It's coming across the creek. It's going to jump up here and grab me and pull me out of this tree. I was just...
Were you scared for your life?
I was scared for my life for sure. I didn't know really what to do. And then all of a sudden, after that scream, it turned and walked away from me. It was walking. It looked back at me one time and looked right at me, and it kept walking. And I watched it walk off into the hardwoods, and it disappeared. And when I seen that thing disappeared, I thought, I'm not even going to take time, 15, 20 minutes to get down this stand. I lowered that bar in front of me all the way down. I jumped up and just jumped from the top of that tree stand, which was about 25 foot up, and landed on that 45-degree angle and slid all the way down in those leaves, holding my gun above my head. I went right into the creek, standing up, like hearing those coyotes during the show.
Yeah, I do too.
And as I landed in the creek, I was standing up, and I had water up about my knees. I was wet, and I just jumped up out of that creek, and I run as fast as I could up that hillside. Behind me, there was a little ravine there. I went right up in it. It was a little bit easier to climb. And I'm running as fast as I can run up that hillside. And we got a Bigfoot behind us.
Yeah, I heard that.
But anyway, I ran up the side of that hill, across the first hill, and running as fast as I could. And I got over that top of that hill, and I'm going down to the second hill. I'm about halfway up the second hill. And the whole time I'm looking back like this because I'm thinking this thing, making sure it's not coming after me. And I'm about halfway up the second hill, and I look back, and there it was, standing on top of that hill looking at me. And I'm thinking, oh my God. So I kicked it in even more. It may have been a different one. It may not have been the same one. I don't know. Possibly was another one. But I ran as fast as I could over the top of that hill and There's a little barbed wire fence at the bottom of that one that hadn't been used in years. I just jumped over it. It was only a couple foot tall. It had fallen in, and my granddad hadn't had cattle back in there in years. And when I got to the top of that third hill, I was looking back, didn't see it, and I was running as fast as I could. And that last hill was about a 45-degree angle like the third hill that I'd been hunting on. And I was running as fast as I can. I only believe I could have stopped if I'd have wanted to, but down that hill, and I had to stop and cross that barbed wire fence that was on the wood line of my grandfather's sage field. So I just said, I'm not even going to try to stop. I'm going to jump this fence. And I jumped it and I cleared it, but the bottom part of my left pants leg got hung on the barbed wire, and it ripped it all the way up past my knee and tore a huge gash in the side of my leg. I didn't know I'd done that, and when I landed on the other side of the fence, I was still running, and I cleared that roughly 200-yard wide sage field till I got all the time looking back, thinking this thing's still coming. And I got to the gate before you got to my grandfather's backyard, and I opened it, went in it, locked it back real quick, and continued to run looking back. And I got to the back porch of my grandfather's house, and he had an old wood farmhouse with a kind of an overhang on the back porch that he kept supplies and stuff under. And I went in the back door and shut the back door, locked it, and looked out actually I hooked the screen in between the back door first, and then shut the door and locked it and looked out the glass in the door. I didn't see it anywhere. And I ran to the right, and I was in the kitchen there when you come through the back door, and you go to the right into the sitting area where my grandfather was at. And I ran over in the corner of the room there to the right and sat down in the corner. There was a big wood potbelly stove that was between that corner and the living room area that my grandfather sat in. And it was almost to the middle of the room. And I sat down behind it. I was so out of breath I couldn't hardly talk. My granddad was sitting there in a rocking chair to the left there in front of that stove, and he looked at me and said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" I couldn't talk. I was trying to catch my breath. Got up a couple times, went and looked out the window, went back to the back door, looked out the glass door, didn't see this thing. I just knew this thing was coming to the house, and I went back in, sat down on the floor again, and I'm still trying to get my breath. And my granddad said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I said, "I don't know, Granddaddy. I seen a monster in the woods." He said, "A monster? What are you talking about?" I said, "This big, huge, hairy-looking, mean thing that looked like it was going to kill me." And he said, "What did it look like?" And I described to him what it looked like, and he goes, "Okay, well, you seen the wood booger." I said, "A wood booger? What is a wood booger?" And my granddad said, "Oh, they've been around here all my life." And he said, "I've seen 4 of them in my lifetime. I'll be working in the field, and I look up, and one's just sitting there watching me work, and never paid much attention to them. They didn't ever try to bother me." He said, "I should have told you they're territorial, and that far in over there, nobody goes back in there. Probably been nobody in there in 20 years, and you probably got in its territory, and you didn't like it much, and it wanted to run you out of there." I said, "Well, it done a good job, because I wouldn't have never went in there if I knew it was a wood booger." And I said, "Why didn't you ever tell me about these things?" He said, "Well, if I had told you about them, you never would have hunted in the woods and camped out at night in the woods, and you wouldn't have spent the night in the hayloft with your friends and your cousins, and you wouldn't have hunted up here." And I said, "Well, I never heard of a wood booger, and you never told me about it. I don't understand that." And he said, "Well, that was the reasoning why, boy. I didn't tell you. I'd never been in that deep in the woods hunting. I always went the first hollow, the second hollow, never went far back that far." And my granddad said the old people, which he was referring to his parents, his dad and mother, and his grandfather, he said they've seen them for years around here, and we call them the wood booger. And he said, "They don't bother you, they're just real territorial." if you're in their area, or you might have interrupted his hunt. He didn't like you in there. And I said, well, he sure done a good job at it. He goes, yeah, they come up here to the house in the wintertime when they get hungry, and when things get rough in the woods, they can't find food. And my granddad had a big log wood, actual logs, chicken house to the left of his porch, probably about 70 feet from it. They had a lot of chickens in there. I don't know how many they had a lot of them, though. He said they'll come up here in the wintertime, they'll get in the hen house, they'll take a couple of chickens, and they don't take them all, just a couple, ever so often when they get hungry, and they'll leave a little pile of rocks and sticks like they're paying for it. And I said, really? He said, yeah, they do that. And he said, boy, it ain't nothing to worry about. And I said, well, of course, we got a Bigfoot right behind us. So, anyway, he told me to calm down, not to worry about it. I'd be all right, but I was pretty shook up. He said, boy, you're white as a ghost. I said, well, I probably am, because it scared me to death, and I don't care to hunt no more up here. And he said, well, you'll be all right. It'll go on by. Time takes care of everything. And I sat there for a couple hours and just trying to calm down, kept getting up, looking out the window in the back door, and I never seen it again. But,
When did you realize that you were wounded from jumping over that fence?
When I got up, when I was sitting over in the corner there behind the stove, I remember touching my leg and I had blood on my hand, and he said, boy, he asked me what I'd done to my leg and told him I hung it on some barbed wire. And that wasn't even a concern at that time. I was more scared to death of this thing coming to the house to get me.
Right.
But I sat there a while, and I got up finally a couple hours later, and my friends had come back. They were out at the camper at the barn, which when he went out his front porch, it was to the left. I don't know how far it was, probably 200 or 300 feet from the house, and they had killed a big buck deer, and it was hanging in the tree, and Scott and Jason and Cody, guys I'd hunted with for a long time, they were skinning it out. They had it hanging in the tree, and they were skinning it. And I walked out there to see them, and they all called me Big D. Most of my friends did call me Big D, and Big D, did you see anything? I said, not anything you'd want to hear about. And they started laughing. What does that mean? And I said, well, we've been hunting up here for 5 or 6 years. I said, y'all ever seen anything in the woods real strange? And they said, what are you talking about? I said, something that looked like a Bigfoot. And they started laughing and said, Big D, you had too much to drink last night. We ain't never seen nothing like that up here. I said, well, I didn't have nothing to drink last night. So I didn't say anything else about it. Just let it go. Just kind of scared to death and still hadn't got over the trauma from it. So they hunted the rest of the week. Of course, Scott had already killed his deer, so he couldn't kill another one. So he sat up in the house with me and most of the rest of the week. And I didn't go back. I went out to the camper and hung out with him a little bit. But when dark came, I went to the house, spent the night with my grandfather.
So you didn't finish out the week hunting after you saw the
They
snake?
hunted. I didn't hunt. No, I didn't hunt. I never hunted. I didn't hunt again for about 7 years. I didn't want to hunt. And I had nightmares for weeks, and that carried on for probably 6 or 7 years before I was in the woods. I would do some deer hunting, but it would be in my truck. I'd pull up my truck in a field where I had permission to hunt, and I'd just stay in the truck and wait for the deer to come out of the wood line. In different areas, not just there, but I didn't go back there at all just to visit my grandfather. I didn't hunt up there. But I never hunted up there again. I went back 2 or 3 years after that with my friends, same thing. But I didn't hunt. I told them I didn't care about hunting no more. I'd kind of gotten tired of it. They went and hunted, but they never seen anything. But it took a long time to get over that. It really did. It was life-changing, that's for sure.
Right, and I know that was just the first time you saw these creatures, and I know you've seen them after that. You've
Yeah, I
had a
think I
lot
would
of-
have never gotten over that if I hadn't. Somewhere in 1999, I was on the Cumberland River between Cheatham County and Nashville, Tennessee. There was an area there that I'd fished for years. Nobody fished in there, but they didn't know how to get in there because you had to have a spot to park. It's hard to get to that spot. And there was an old water treatment sewer plant or something there. And a friend
That's
of
where
mine.
you had your second encounter with Bigfoot, right?
Correct, yeah.
All right, brother. So this is just the first of many interviews that we're going to do here, and we're going to cut it off here. So it's pretty good, and thank you for having this little fireside chat with me tonight, brother, down here in LBL.
Appreciate you, brother. Love you, man.
I love you too, and we'll get back with you again real soon to hear about your other encounters. I know they're really, really bizarre.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it, Brother Bart.
You're welcome. Anybody that wants to read about Darrell's encounters before I can make some more videos, can go to Amazon.com and get Josh Turner's book, The Bigfoot Phenomenon, which includes Darrell's story. Pretty good, detailed telling of Darrell's story. So you guys check it out. And thank you, Darrell, again. Love you, brother.
Love you, brother.
And
Appreciate
we'll be
you having
talking to
me
you
on.
again. Yeah, we'll be talking to you again real soon.
All right. Thank you, bud.